just set me on tilt. And today, what's really just unbelievable, Mitch McConnell, headline, and in Breitbart, Mitch McConnell urges House Republicans to avoid Biden impeachment. How dare he? But let's look at what he really said, because that plays into it shows that Mitch McConnell is in fact really out of touch with what's going on in Washington, D.C. and the Biden investigation. He needs to get up to speed. He needs to wake up. Um, here's what he said 2 years ago. This is New York Times today. I said 2 years ago, when we had not one but two impeachments, that once we go down this path, it incentivizes the other side to do the same thing, said Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky and minority leader. Impeachment ought to be rare. This is not good for the country. Mitch McConnell is right. In an absolute blind, without knowing anything that's going on, impeachment should be rare, meaning they shouldn't have impeached Donald Trump multiple times when he didn't do anything wrong. And it should be reserved for very, very dangerous situations. But it is a necessity for the country when you have absolute abject corruption exposed, which is what has occurred in the House by the House of Representatives doing their job, not McConnell's job. McConnell is the jury. The Senate is the jury. The House decides whether to impeach. The House is doing their job. And that's why we're really urging you to take action right now. And if you've already done this, just share this with your friends. Share this. Take action, urging the House to impeach Biden now. This will go to every House member, every senator, every one of your senators. So your two senators, your one House member. Just go to the link that's in the comment section. It's top of the comment section. Click on it and take action while we're doing this live stream. What's more, share this and share this. Take action. People around the country are appalled by what's going on, but they don't know what to do. This is something that they can directly do to take action to show the House Oversight Committee and the House Judiciary Committee, Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell, that the public demands that they do their job and impeach Joe Biden. So please, take action with this. I'm going to go now to just show you. Here is what, by the way, was released today by the House Oversight Committee. And this is kind of Senator McConnell, your staff. I know that some of you are watching this, so let's just be clear. This is what your boss needs to know about. So maybe you ought to do a briefing paper or something. Just today, the House Oversight Committee released bank records, detailing a memo on bank records, detailing how the Bidens and their associates received millions from oligarchs in Russia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine. As Hunter Biden was sealing these deals, the then Vice President Biden dined with these oligarchs in D.C. As a summary of it, we've now identified 20 million in payments from foreign sources to the Bidens and their associates. During Joe Biden's vice presidency, Hunter sold him as the brand, quote unquote. No real services were provided other than access to the Biden network, including Joe Biden himself. Then it details a transaction between one of the oligarchs in Moscow, 3.5 million being transferred with a big graphic and everything. In spring of 2014, a Ukrainian oligarch placed Archer and Biden, Devin Archer and Joe Biden and Hunter Biden on the Burisma board of directors. Now you all know this. Agreed to pay each of them $1 million per year. Then Vice President Joe Biden visited Ukraine soon after they joined Burisma. Hunter claimed credit for this visit to show value. Now, folks, I want you to just do some math. Hunter Biden was on the Burisma board for 5 years. 5 years at $1 million a year. Remember that that confidential human source that said 5 million for one Biden, 5 million for another Biden? And kind of, well, that confidential human source, 1 million times 5 is 5 million. Hunter Biden was paid $5 million. We know that. We know that. So let's go to what this latest bank memorandum has for us. The key to this is Joe Biden was the brand sold around the world to enrich the Biden family, and he was used to signal their access, influence, and power. The committee investigation has shown the money that was transferred to the Bidens from foreign nationals or entities based in Russia, Kazakhstan, and Ukraine when Joe Biden was vice president. Then Vice President Biden met in person for significant periods of time with those individuals or their representatives. Then Vice President Biden joined approximately 20 phone calls on speakerphone with Hunter Biden's foreign business associates and attended dinners with foreign oligarchs who had paid huge sums of money to Hunter Biden. Joe Biden, the brand, was the only product the Biden sold. Okay, so Joe Biden, when he lied about it, he wasn't involved in his son's business dealings. He was the object of his son's business dealings. But you don't have to believe me. You don't have to believe this committee. Here's what Devin Archer said about what happened. Devin Archer testified that Hunter Biden called his dad when he was pressured by natural gas firm Burisma Holdings, for which they served on the board of directors, for help in D.C. in December 4th, remember the date, December 4, 2015, in Dubai, UAE, according to a transcript. So let's look at the transcript. What did he make the calls about? Well, transcript right here. Did Zolotowski or Vadim ask Hunter Biden to make any phone calls? Yes, though I was not party to the call. What was the request? The request was, I think, they were getting pressure, and they requested Hunter, help them out with some of that pressure. What pressure? Government. It's a government pressure on their, government pressure from Ukrainian government investigators into Mykola, etc. But it was not a specific request. It was just, we were sitting there at the Four Seasons having, coffee, and there was Mykola, there was one of the managers for the Four Seasons who managed the property. And so it wasn't like closed, but it wasn't a specific meeting. Okay. So you go down to, the Archers, and was it about investigating Victor Shokin? To the best, whether it was Shokin, there was a lot of pressure initially. There were several pressure issues. It was kind of a theme of Burisma. So Jim Jordan continues pushing. Did he request help? Well, Mr. Archer, the request, basically the request is like, can DC help? But there were not, there were not. It wasn't like, there wasn't very specific, can the big guy help? It's always this amorphous, can we get help in DC? Note the big guy usage. The request was help from the U.S. government to deal with pressure. They were under from their prosecutor. And that entailed the freezing of assets at the London Bank and other things that were going on in Ukraine. That's Jim Jordan asking that question. Mr. Archer, correct. So Archer agrees with this simple thing. The request was help from the U.S. government to deal with the pressure they were under from their prosecutor. And that entailed the freezing of assets of the London Bank and other things that were going on in Ukraine. The pressure from the Ukrainian prosecutor. He confirms that. So you go down further and you discover that Devin Archer agrees, says that he was told that Hunter Biden goes to, okay, here we go. What did Hunter Biden do after he was given that request? Listen, Archer says, listen, did not hear this phone call, but he called his dad. Question, how do you know that? Answer, because I think Vadim told me. Vadim was the CFO of Burisma, and he was one of two people who went into the room to make the phone call to Joe Biden. So he went into a separate room. Devin Archer didn't hear it. He wasn't in the room. Vadim comes out and tells Archer, we called the big guy, essentially. So what do we have? This is something, Senator McConnell, you need to pay attention to this. This is important. Your buddy Joe, who you served in the Senate with from 1984 till he was elected vice president in 2009, who Biden then served as the president of the Senate, or the head of the Senate, as vice president. So you served with him for 8 more years. So we know you've got a 30-plus year relationship with Joe Biden. Senator McConnell, Joe Biden's a crook. Joe Biden's a crook, plain and simple. He sold access to the U.S. government. He took action, by his own words, to get Viktor Shokin fired as a prosecutor in Ukraine at the direct behest of the Burisma leadership and his son, Hunter Biden, who was paid $5 million over the course of 5 years. We know that for a fact. We have a vice president of the United States. Then you got to see this. Remember the date, December 4? Well, this is Joe Biden 4 days later, on December 8th, 2015, talking about corruption in Ukraine. This is worth staying through. So this is about 2 minutes, 44 seconds. I know it's not going to be great, but this is incredible.
But in addition, we also have a battle, a historic battle against corruption. Ukraine cannot afford for the people to lose hope again. The only worse than having no hope at all is having hopes rise and see them dashed repeatedly on the shoals of corruption.
Okay, we got a guy who's taking money, millions of dollars. His family's taking money to try to do something about the prosecutor who's pressuring Burisma. And he's now in front of the legislature of that country 4 days later. 4 days later, talking about corruption. And who does he focus on?
And if the people resign themselves to exploitation and corruption for fear of losing whatever little they have left, that would be the death knell for Ukrainian democracy. We've taken so many critical steps already, but all of you know there's more to do to finish this race. Not enough has been done yet. As the Prime Minister and the President heard me often say, I never tell another man or another nation or another woman what's in their interest. But I can tell you, you cannot name me a single democracy in the world where the cancer of corruption is prevalent. You cannot name me one. They are thoroughly inconsistent.
And hence why this guy needs to be impeached. Corruption is inconsistent with American way of governance. He said it. He's lecturing the very people who he's shaking down for millions of dollars in order to get rid of the corruption, quote unquote, of a prosecutor who has the audacity of actually investigating his son's client.
And it's not enough to set up a new anti-corruption bureau and establish a special prosecutor fighting corruption. The Office of the General Prosecutor desperately needs reform. The judiciary should be overhauled. The energy sector needs to be competitive, ruled by market principles, not sweetheart deals. It's not enough to push through laws to increase transparency with regard to official sources of income. Senior elected officials have to remove all conflicts between their business interests and their government responsibilities. Every other democracy in the world, that system pertains. Oligarchs and non-oligarchs must pay by the same rules. They have to pay their taxes, settle their disputes in court, not by bullying judges. That's basic. That's how nations succeed in the 21st century. Corruption siphons.
Hold on. Once again, listen. He says that they have to settle it through courts and not by bullying judges. When he's busy bullying the Ukrainian government to fire the prosecutor who's causing problems for his son's client. I mean, the audacity of Joe Biden in making this speech, which, by the way, if you don't know that he's on the take, if you don't know that he's on the take, this speech is a perfectly normal speech for an American vice president to give, until you know that this guy was directly getting money. He was getting paid. And his whole objective was to put pressure on a prosecutor, to bully a prosecutor, bully a government into firing a prosecutor. I mean, come on. even Mitch McConnell, even a John Cornyn from Texas, even even they should be able to see this and this speech and the knowledge that 4 days later, his son made a phone call to Washington, D.C. with the top executives of Burisma on one side and Joe Biden on the other, complaining about the pressure they were getting from the top prosecutor in Ukraine and asking him to do something about it. 4 days later, he gives this speech.
Away resources of the people, it blunts the economic growth, and it affronts the human dignity. We know that. You know that. The Ukrainian people know that. When Russia seeks to use corruption as a tool of coercion, reform isn't just good governance, it's self-preservation. It's in the national security interest of the nation. But in addition, we also have a battle.
That's, I mean, I know that this is hard to believe that he made that speech 4 days after the call. But let's be clear. This is corruption beyond what we have experienced or seen in America in history. What Joe Biden's done is he's an absolute standout in terms of creating a corrupt activity and getting paid for selling influence and using the vice presidency to enrich his family. And it's just so. Senator McConnell, you need to impeach. The House needs to impeach Joe Biden. And you need to sit and forget that he was your friend and understand that he was selling our country's foreign policy interests out. In many places, that gets you shot for treason. Impeachment is a very kind punishment for this. But impeachment is the only punishment that the Constitution allows to remove a president who no longer can be trusted because they've sold the national interests through their career. It goes beyond high crimes and misdemeanors. This is a violation, as Joe Biden put it. This is a violation of everything that holds a country like America together. When power's for sale, and the only people who become targets are those without the money to buy the influence, you have no country at all. So while Joe Biden's words before the Ukrainian parliament, 4 days after he took a call from his son in Burisma, urging him to try to do something about the investigations of Burisma coming from the prosecutor's office in Ukraine, are the indictment. It shows the direct linkage. But we know what else it shows? You then go to the one we've seen a zillion times of Joe Biden bragging about it later on. And so you take those two facts, those dates, and then you look at this guy. Just messed it up. Then you look at this guy.
It's the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid at the time. Well, there's still,
So once again, folks, this is I could show you all sorts of other evidences, but I think you know them. The answer to this question is, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to help, or are we going to sit and complain? What we're trying to do is put as much pressure as possible on Joe Biden through Congress, and make Congress wake up to the fact that this is an untenable situation. Joe Biden can no longer be president. He is ineligible. He has broken the basic rule that you don't sell access to power. And he's shown that he's been willing to use the money that's been put in his pocket, and then use the power of the United States to do the bidding of oligarchs around the world. It's insane. He cannot be allowed to continue to be president of the United States. I'm going to ask you guys once again, at the top of the chat when you first come in, or in the comments, or on the at the intro of this video, you can click on and take action and to impeach Joe Biden. We've set that up for you, and we ask that you share that take action with everybody you can. Share this video with everybody you can, but also share the take action. And the reason for sharing it is we have, on Facebook alone, we have 420,000 followers. If all 420,000 followers shared this with their lists, with their email list, with the people who follow them on email, this would have reach millions and millions of people. And Congress would be overwhelmed with demand that they impeach Biden. I can get this information to you. I can get it to the 100,000 or so people who have subscribed to the newsletter, to our newsletter, free of charge. And I am. It's going to be, if you're subscribed, it's going to be in your inbox before I get off this call. Well, it'll be in the inbox probably about 4 o'clock, 4 p.m. Eastern time today. But so you'll have it in your inbox. If you're not subscribed, subscribe. Go to dailytorch.com and subscribe. It's very simple. Just put your email in, and you'll be subscribed, and it's free. But folks, when the Mitch McConnells of the world are still walking around with their head in the clouds, thinking it's 1985, and we're trying to, and things are, we don't have a dire consequence based on what's happening in the White House. He's wandering around without apparently a clue what's going on the other side of the Capitol and the evidences that are being provided. It's up to us to wake him up. It's up to us to wake up the John Cornyn's and the various others who sit there and cling to a delusion that Joe Biden is just, he's just one of them who just happens to be president now, and we all got to take care of one another in the club. No. In fact, my great desire is for Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn and the rest of those guys. Talk to Chuck Grassley. Chuck Grassley is on fire because he knows what Biden's up to. He's the one who's been pushing this from the Senate side in many ways more effectively than what's been done in the House. Chuck Grassley has taken the bull by the horns and has been unafraid to continue pushing this agenda, when I'm sure his colleagues would prefer he shut up. It's time they listen to Chuck Grassley, because when a president of the United States is engaged in activity where he uses his influence, even if he was only vice president then, uses official influence in order to direct government policy and to affect foreign governments to take actions that they wouldn't otherwise have taken. When he does that, and he's being paid for it, not by the U.S. taxpayer, he's being paid for it by people who have an interest in the outcome. You don't get to be a lobbyist for Burisma and vice president of the United States. Yet that's what this guy did. He needs to be impeached. It's the only way to fire him for his offenses. There's multiple other examples that the House Oversight Committee is coming up with, from taking money from the Chinese interests, to there's an example of a guy from Kazakhstan who gave Hunter Biden the exact price of a new car he bought the next day in his bank account. And more is coming, because folks, when you're following the money and your subpoenas to the banks demanding bank records begin to be met, the money becomes, no matter how many places you run it through, you're able to track it. And no matter how hard Biden tried to hide this scheme through 20 fake corporations, 13 different banks, ultimately, the House Oversight Committee could show $10 million that flowed into the Biden family directly as a result of selling the brand Joe Biden. Folks, we got to impeach this guy. I'm going to now look at some of the chat, because let's see here. Betsy, you asked, I've signed it. Can I sign it? Yes, you can. Betsy, feel free to sign it again. It is fine, and share it with everybody that you want. It is, these guys we need to make certain that those who are your representatives hear clearly from you. And there's no rule that you can only sign something once. This isn't like, voter registration. And if it is, then just pretend you're a Democrat and sign it as many times as you need to. Will any of it matter if a majority congressman blackmailed or paid off? Amy, you know why it matters? It matters because fighting for this country is worth doing. I can't guarantee outcomes. What I can is say, if we pull together and fight to save this country, and we do everything in our power, God willing, we're successful. But if we're not, we can look our children and our grandchildren in the eyes and say, I did everything I could. And ultimately, that's all we can do. God's in control. I'm not in control. My wife keeps telling me I'm not God. I guess I'm got to start believing her. But it is but ultimately, does it matter? It matters. It matters because ultimately, I want to be able to hold my head high, and I know you do too. And that's one of the reasons for sharing it, by the way, and not just keeping your light under a bushel. I say they replace him first with either Sangali's wife or Newsom, Michelle or Newsom. Yeah, Nancy, just constitutionally, they can't really do that. I mean, Kamala is the vice president. She would become the president. They would then have to replace the vice president and get congressional approval on whoever they pick. The precedent on that is when Spiro Agnew resigned in 73, I think it was. Yeah, 73. There was Richard Nixon then had to pick somebody to replace Agnew, and he picked Gerald Ford because Gerald Ford was the House Minority Leader at the time, but he also was not seen as somebody who would be president of the United States. So he wasn't picking a successor because Richard Nixon was, in fact, he's in his second term. And the Democrats laid down a very simple rule. You can't pick somebody who's going to be a strong candidate in 1976. And so he picked Ford. And then when Richard Nixon resigned, Gerald Ford faced the same restriction in that the Democrats didn't want somebody who could be a candidate in 76. So he ended up picking Nelson Rockefeller, who had aged out of the system at that point. as kind of a caretaker in the event that something happened to Ford. And so Nelson Rockefeller became the vice president. So, and as we know, Gerald Ford lost in '76, much more competitive race than people expected. But fact is, that was the process. That's the last time we've gone through this. And so you would have Kamala Harris having to pick a vice president, at which point there'd be a lot of back and forth, and both sides would have something to say about who that person would be. I always try to educate with my limited knowledge I have of what happened. Mitch knows impeaching Joe will lead to him and many more in Washington. You know, Keith, that's a disturbing allegation, because I can't refute that. It's, one of the things that I find interesting, and it bothers me a lot about this. Apparently, every two-bit thug oligarch around the world knew that if you want to get something done in Washington, D.C., call up Hunter and pay Hunter, and suddenly you're going to have access to whatever access to people who can make it happen. Apparently that was well known. I find it difficult to believe it wasn't well known amongst his Senate colleagues, and amongst the so-called intelligentsia in the Senate, people who hang out at cocktail parties together. I find that hard to believe. We know that from the Trump impeachment on Ukraine, we know that people in the National Security Council and the State Department were very concerned about Hunter Biden's dealings. And so it wasn't like it was a secret. They knew what was going on. And yet, who got impeached because because of all the stuff we just saw? Donald Trump, who had the audacity to ask about it. That's who gets impeached. Donald Trump, because he had the audacity to ask about it. I guess asking about a foreign government to investigate what is clear corruption and a crime is a far worse, in McConnell's mind, is a far worse thing than actually committing the crime. By the way, the same people who impeached Trump because ostensibly he was investigating his opponent, remember that, are now busily cheering as Donald Trump gets indicted multiple times by his opponent in 2024, Joe Biden. That's the, just straightforward. That's the, these guys, every time they complain about something, that's what they're doing. And that's what they've done here. It makes me sick to my stomach, truthfully. It really does bother me a great deal. I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like this place we live in. I love my country, and it rips my guts out to know that we've got a government for sale. And not for sale for domestic reasons, even for pecuniary interest domestically. And you always knew there's always some corruption in that regard. That's kind of built into the system. I kind of bake that into the cake in terms of my thinking. But when you have people who have really bad people around the world, when you have the Chinese Communist Party having what appears to be, a significant hook into the current president of the United States, it's hard to deal with. And maybe that's what some of these congressmen and senators have a difficulty doing, because when you think about it, what you have to believe, what you have to come to grips with, is that the current president of the United States is essentially a captured agent of people who paid him a lot of money. And it's the only explanation for the satellite balloon not being shot down. And when it was shot down, being shot down in a way that a lot of the electronics were destroyed. There's really the lie that was told that it wasn't transmitting, when it clearly was transmitting the entire time it flew across the country. So we knew it was transmitting. Our Defense Department knew it was transmitting and told us it wasn't. Why would they do that? And you sit there and you look, you say, you try to figure out why would they do that? And the answer is, were they trying to avoid war? Were they trying to avoid a confrontation? Or were they in a wink and a nod thing and saying, well, let's just push this off? And what did the White House say about that? What were the orders received from Joe Biden on that? And what instigated those orders? Well, the fact I have to ask that question is why he has to be impeached. I might not agree with the decision that Joe Biden makes. Lord knows I don't agree with most of them. But if I can believe, I have to be able to believe, the American public has to be able to believe that Joe Biden's making that decision based on what he views as in the best interest of the United States, and not because he got millions of dollars from some crumb bum located in some squalid place of the world that Americans never heard of, and now he's representing interests that have nothing to do with American interests. That's why he has to be impeached. And that's why Mitch McConnell needs to wake up. And quit trying to undermine the House's work. It's inexcusable. It's not his job. So if he doesn't want to comment on the House's work, he should shut the F up. He should shut up and say, as a senator, I'm going to have to not talk about that, because if it becomes an issue before the Senate, I want to be able to look at it rationally and based on the evidence that's presented. That's what he should say, not issue an opinion about that clearly sends a message to Kevin McCarthy. Don't send this over to us. We don't want it. Anyway, he needs to be impeached now. He has done enough damage to our country. His son needs to go to jail. As the great saying goes, be a grown man, admit what you were guilty of. And for the rest of you Republicans that don't want to impeach him, follow him out the door. Marie, I love your dog and I love your sentiment. Let's see what we got. Robert Romano. Yes, you can sign it as many times as you want. Please share. Okay, that's going back to Betsy's comment. Let's see here. Paul Humphus, long his ass up, along with everyone in his administration, nothing else will satisfy we the people. Enough said. Members of the House and Senate, Joe and all related, charged with treason and sentenced as such. I'm not going to go with the execution part, or even the life imprisonment part, but I will tell you that because that's what they're trying to do to Trump, this is a dangerous cycle. One thing Mitch McConnell says is true is we're in a dangerous cycle. I think impeaching him, throwing him out of office, holding his family accountable for, and having Hunter Biden really face the music in terms of the various crimes he's committed, and not get the special signed off deal where he gets a slap on the wrist. Those are things which matter. Prosecuting the law is what matters. But Joe Biden, I believe that impeachment is the best possible outcome. I also agree with what Gerald Ford said, that it wasn't in America's interest to have put our former presidents on trial. I think that's true. I think that you have impeachment. That's the vehicle. And that's what we should do, because in Central America or in third world countries around the world, you become president, and and a lot of times you end up going to jail afterwards because your opponents take over and they jail you. And you have basically a succession of coups, for all intents and purposes, from various interest groups that are having coups back and forth. And you don't have a stable system of government. You don't have elections. You don't have any of those things. You don't have the pretense of election. We do not want to devolve into that. So that is the spirit of what Mitch McConnell said in the beginning. The problem is he said it to the New York Times in the context of a current investigation into a very, very corrupt president. he's right in theory. He's wrong in this particular moment in history. And that's the message that I'm hoping to overwhelm him with through your actions by taking action today. We are going to, let's see what else we have here. George Wallace. Wow, that's a lot of kids there, George. Kids and grandkids. Are you serious? There isn't any way Senator Mitch McConnell will ever vote for his buddy Joe Biden to be impeached. Let me ask a question. What negative thing has Mitch McConnell said about Biden in recent months? Nothing. There's the answer to your impeaching Biden. Well, you know what? That's an interesting question. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I will tell you this, this might be, Mitch McConnell's up again in 2026. This might be the last time he may never face the voters again. But I guarantee you this, it's going to be in the 2024 election trail for the Republicans who are trying to win the Senate. The question every single one of those people running for office are going to have to answer is, will you vote for Mitch McConnell to be minority or majority leader? And the only real vote he cares about is the vote of his Senate Republican colleagues as whether or not they'll keep him in power. And if he becomes as toxic as Paul Ryan was, that's when Mitch McConnell is going to pay attention. And a vote to acquit Joe Biden with a mountain of evidence that it would be presented would in fact be a vote for him not to be. His colleagues would use that and say, you can't lead us because the people who follow us don't trust you anymore. And it effectively ends his political career. So folks, you're right, but I think your sentiments, your thinking is strong on this. But Mitch McConnell cares about a constituency of 51, 52, anywhere from 48 to 53 Republican senators. That's the constituency he cares about. And if he's, let's just make an assumption that the evidence that we've seen gets presented to the Senate, and there's not a refutation that's effective, and because the defense has a right to present their case too, that Mitch McConnell is going to have to listen to the will of those senators, which is why every single one of you have to sign that impeachment petition and send it. It's actually email that goes to your senators, because the Republican senators who you send it to and who your friends send it to are going to be the ones telling Mitch McConnell, I'm getting buried on this. You need to lead on this. You can't protect your friend. That's the politics. The constituency, the democracy he cares about is the democracy in the Senate, and whether or not he gets to maintain his role as minority leader or majority leader. So every single one of those senators that you contact and say, and put pressure on through contacting them, that's one more pressure point that goes to Mitch McConnell and says, you have to vote for impeachment. You have to support this impeachment. So yeah, are we trying to weigh the jury here? Are we trying to influence the jury, which is the Senate? Absolutely. And we're not going to be able to do that if we go in thinking, oh, this will never work. We might not be able to impeach him. We might not be able. It's good chance that he won't be found guilty. But we need to hold these guys to the oath that they took when they put their hand on a Bible, or other hand in the air, and they took an oath to the Constitution of the United States, to defend the Constitution of the United States. We need to hold them to that oath. We have to hold them to do their freaking job. And right now, their job is, among many others, is in the House to pursue this impeachment investigation, bring it to the floor, vote to impeach Joe Biden, and then prosecute Joe Biden for his crimes in front of the Senate jury. and for the Republicans in that Senate jury to say, we love Joe Biden. He's our good friend and former colleague, but he cannot be president any longer because of what he did. And let the Democrats defend him. Last thing we need is, we don't need Mitch McConnell being a defense attorney for Joe Biden. So anyway, you got me worked up. So we'll be back tomorrow with another one of these. I just wanted you to be aware of this, and once again, it's incredibly important that you click on to the Impeach Joe Biden, the take action, and share this video with anybody who hit the share button, subscribe. If you're so inclined, become a subscriber on Facebook, for instance. You can become a subscriber to the Facebook network, and I think it's $6 a month or something. And just help us pay for continuing this operation. But folks, this matters. This is about the country. This is about saving our country, and a simple click to share is worth doing. Thank you very much for sticking with us on this and for being just supporters. And I can't tell you how much it means to us that you are out there fighting for this country, and that we're not here all by ourselves fighting a battle with no army behind us. You are the army behind us, and I just thank you for that. With that, I'll see you tomorrow.